the city of Muskego for July 21st. Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Statement of public notice.
The agenda was posted and distributed to all news media requesting notification in accordance with the open meeting law on July 16, 2020.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes for June 2nd.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Consent business.
Oh,
roll
I'm sorry.
call.
roll
I'm
call.
sorry.
That's all right. Commissioner Graff.
Here.
Alderman Kubacki.
Here.
Mayor Pitfalski.
Here.
Commissioner Buckmaster.
Here.
Commissioner Bartlett. Here. We have a quorum.
And new guy always screws up the agenda. I'm sorry. Moving on to consent business.
Consent Resolution PC 041-2020, approval of a second accessory structure for Dennis Volmir on Glenbrook Drive. And Resolution PC 045-2020, approval of a certified survey map for Pagaro located on Crowbar Drive.
Move to approve and gross.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Moving on to new business for consideration, Resolution PC 039-2020, recommendation to Common Council to amend the zoning map and 2020 comprehension plan for the city of Muskego for Cornerstone Development for the property located, and I'm not going to read the whole tax key, but southeast corner of the city.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, discussion?
Thank
So
you,
we'll
Mayor.
have to give Adam a little leeway here tonight. He's doing double duty, so there'll be some pausing between all this. So.
Thank you. All right. So the proposal that's in front of us, there's kind of two parts to this. Resolution PC 39, which we're discussing first, is a rezoning and land use amendment. And then it will be followed by PC 40, which will be the building site and operation plan approval. So I'll kind of talk about it kind of all in one and can ask questions as you have them. So the first portion is the rezoning. The rezoning is from RM1 multifamily district, B4 highway business district, and PD 38 Stonebridge Plan Development District, and the rezoning to a new plan development district based upon the RM2 multiple family residence district zoning, and a 2020 comprehensive plan amendment from high density residential and commercial uses to medium density residential. So this proposal that's in front of us tonight, we've seen a few different versions of it, either conceptually or for actual votes over the past handful of years. This proposal is obviously the one they're landed on at this time. The proposal is for 2-family and 4-family homes or duplexes or double duplexes as they're calling them. And within that development, they're proposing a total of 80 units. Those 80 units are spread over about 43.37 acres. These are located off of Loomis Drive. They're bordered by the north by the Stonebridge subdivision. Loomis is on the southern boundary, and the western boundary is the entry driveway to the Muskego Lakes Country Club driveway. That western boundary, which is that driveway to the golf course, will actually be dedicated and improved as a public road as part of this proposal if approved. As well as their internal streets to the development that will all be private. So it'll be a public road leading up until where their northernmost private road splits off, and then the development itself will have private roads within it. We did have a public hearing for this at Common Council last week. There was one comment and concern that was submitted via email from a neighbor resident who lives in the Stonebridge subdivision. They had some concerns with screening or landscaping from their view. And then there was also a gentleman representing the Champions Village Homeowners Association, and he also said he spoke for the Stonebridge Association president, and they were both recommending in favor of this development. They made some comments to the extent of out of the proposals they've seen before, they were the most satisfied with this proposal. The proposal would include a clubhouse. It would include some amenities like a bocce ball court and pickleball court and a pool. There is a trail that will be provided as part of this that will lead from the Loomis Trail north to the Stonebridge subdivision. There will be an emergency-only access driveway at the end of Stonebridge, the road in Stonebridge subdivision, which will serve as an access to this property. The developer has worked pretty extensively with the DOT to try to get another access point on Highway 36, being a state road though. The DOT basically made it sound like that was either impossible or very difficult. So it was one of those things where the DOT kind of suggested they look at other options, and that's why they're proposing the emergency drive they are today. But as far as the rezoning goes, staff is recommending approval from the standpoint of it definitely seems to fit well within the area. It's the first proposal we've seen in this site that the neighbors around there have been, very content with. So yeah, and then I'll talk more about the architecture in the next item. Sure. We can have the comment that way they can maybe respond.
All right. First, we have a request for comment first from Ms. Carol Evers. Do you want to come up first and share your concerns or praise or whatever it's going to be? Yeah, you might have to turn the microphone on.
It should be on.
It is on? Okay. And you can, if you want, if you're more comfortable, you can pull it out or tilt it back. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. It's just a
say your name and address, please.
Carol Evers, S97W13725 Stonebridge Way.
Thank you.
It's a concern regarding the north side development of the Glen at Muskego Lakes, basically because my backyard will look over at that development. And I'm glad that everybody supposedly is perfectly fine with this, except nobody was informed of it. So it went through, I think, one person representing our subdivision without acknowledgement to any of the neighbors. I think they just thought it was better than the previous option, so they agreed to it. And it is much better than the previous option that was offered, I think, a year ago or so. So that is true, but it still affects what we see out of our back window. So I just wanted to read a little history of our time in Muskego. Approximately 7 years ago, our best friends were looking for property in Muskego, and they asked us to do a ride along, and we did. They changed their minds, but we were intrigued by Muskego, so we started looking for property. And one requirement was to not have a house very close to our backyard because that was what we were moving away from. When we found the lot on Stonebridge Way, behind it was a pond, wetlands, natural vegetation, and a tree line. We were told by a longtime resident who was on the Stonebridge board at that time that Stonebridge land ended on just the other side of the tree line. We asked about development on Highway 36 and were told it was highly unlikely as the state wouldn't allow another entrance on that highway. And so we bought the land and built a house that has a large back window, a sunroom full of windows, a small deck, and a patio, all designed to overlook a pond, wetlands, natural vegetation, and a tree line. In winter, after a snowfall, the land is absolutely stunning. There's an abundance of wildlife on this land. In winter and spring, deer are spotted as they feed on the natural vegetation, and it's harder to see them as the growth gets taller, but they're there. And at night, we hear owls in the trees, hawks that perch in the trees daily hunting for prey. Many types of birds and other wildlife are prevalent, and occasionally we even hear the howl of coyote. It's very concerning and disappointing that conservancy in this area has diminished. Developers are allowed to completely bulldoze anything that stands in the way of development, and Muskego made this possible by doing away with conservancy restrictions to attract development. The Ryan Road development on the other side of the golf course is a perfect example of this, totally bulldozed. Even though I know Cornerstone is a quality developer, I wish that we had been informed earlier in the process as to what was happening behind our home. I request that reconsideration please be given to the landscaping on the north side of the property of the Glens at Muskego Lakes. I believe there is still a way to lessen the amount of existing landscape that needs to be destroyed in order to accommodate what is needed to develop the land for the condos. Thank you.
Would you like to talk about your developments?
Good evening. John Whalen here with Cornerstone Development and Alan Peters with True Vine Development. Alan acts as a consultant to help us plan our communities and work with municipalities to make sure that we come up with the most appropriate plan for the entire neighborhood for whatever setting that we're in. And I appreciated the comments that were just shared. I understand the concerns for sure. A few things that I would say to point out to you on the council here, the homes that we have will all face to the north with garages being tucked and hidden so that they won't be looking at garages. They'll be looking at finished, improved landscaping and landscaping that'll be maintained. And that's one of the advantages that a condominium will bring. For example, if this was another single-family neighborhood going in, it would likely be the backyards, and who knows what, those folks that are on Stonebridge, what they would be facing. So I can assure these folks it'll be fully landscaped, basically front yards, if you will, that they'll look at. And I want to call attention to the distance. So while on a map it's sometimes hard to ascertain, in many respects, and Alan, you can correct me here, we're 400 to 490 feet away. 339. So I'm not sure which home you're in. So 339 feet to some of our buildings that are over in this section here, which would be the north and western portion, which I assume would be the 339. I know we calculated 486. So we will do what we can to create a landscaping plan that'll be beautiful and maintained. That I can assure you. That's what we always do. If there are other specific questions or highlights, I can point out some things, but I think Adam did a great job of kind of overlaying what our plan is here. I would add one other element, though. There's a park planned, a pocket park is what we would call it. Both of the HOA presidents that we did meet with, as well as Alderwoman Eileen Matsons, we discussed putting a park here where the black dot is and putting the pathway in, the red pathway, so that if there are children or bike riders or pedestrians of sort that would like to, they come down Stonebridge and then down the pedestrian path along 36 on Loomis, which is occurring right now. Then rather than having kids or even adults on a bike or walking coming up the street that would take you into Muskego Lakes, now the option will be to stay on a pathway, which will then take you to the park and then lead back up to the cul-de-sac of Stonebridge. Not a cul-de-sac that'll be a through except for emergency vehicles. So it was asked for by the owners of the neighborhoods above us, and we thought that was a good idea.
Questions from the commission?
So on the property line, so I guess on Stonebridge Way, so the house is not abut the,
Can't hear you.
oh, sorry. All right. Where the petitioner or the on Stonebridge where the good lady's home is. So if she's looking at that, how many feet is that between that backyard and the next development?
I think that's 339 in that area.
I assume the 339 is right. Visually, okay, so 339 sounds correct.
And I take it the elevations are similar there, right? I don't see the map, but is it lower or higher? Do we know?
Well, I think they're slightly lower in the field right now because I
Okay.
think some of those homes in Stonebridge, correct me if I'm wrong, have exposures or partial exposures. Yeah, so that would inherently mean they're probably higher.
Okay.
Now, this site though could have some elevation change depending on groundwater. We have a newer requirement that they have to count for groundwater, so maybe they can comment on what they're doing with
Yeah,
that. but-
because I'm looking at this and I understand the concern with what's around your existing property. However, I don't know how to address that, given that the zoning by right would be even probably worse than what they're proposing. So I guess if you look at by right, I'm just trying to calculate that. But when you look at the water there, I mean, it's possible, I think, that there could be additional landscaping around there. But I'm not sure, does that help? And I'm not suggesting that that's but.
The question is, why do you have to remove all the trees?
Well, that's what I think they'll comment on that, but I'm just trying to determine, so the trees that would block your view.
So let me clarify one thing so the city, has a park and conservation plan. That conservation plan actually identifies different priorities of tree importance based upon species, size, things like that. The area adjacent to the driveway is identified as a real high quality. They're not touching those trees. The tree line that's in question is kind of, think of it if you drive through, right about here. So if you drive through like rural America and you think of what you used to see in between farm fields, like when one farmer's field ended and the other one ended, you'd kind of have a strip of trees. That's kind of where the backs of some of the proposed condos is where the strip of trees would be. So they are preserving a significant amount of trees. In fact, everything that's identified in that plan as a high priority isn't being touched, except for maybe a driveway cut through. This tree line is something that isn't identified in that plan as high quality because it was probably just scrub stuff that grew up. Doesn't mean it doesn't still provide screening, but it's something that we normally couldn't require preservation of because of that plan.
That was not clear to me. Thank you. So, all right, well, that would have answered my question, actually.
And it's certainly not our desire to take trees down. In fact, I think historically people have come in and suggested that you could develop to the south and west of the drive for the golf course. We love that tree drive, that whole tree line drive. The turn-in is before you get to those to come to our neighborhood. So the idea is to maintain as many of those as possible, as well as many as possible to the north of us.
Okay, no, that answered my question. All right, I would be interested in the water, though, as far as how did that get determined, I guess?
So when you're looking at the drawing that's on the screen, which is when you're looking at, so some of the blue you see is wetland area. Some of the blue you see is a pond or potential pond. And some of the ponds are dry pond features. So that area in question, in the Stonebridge subdivision to the north, you'll see there's some homes. There's like about 4 or 5 homes that butt up to a pond. That's the stormwater pond for the Stonebridge subdivision. Then you have an area wetland. And that's some of the northern blue you see by those north central 4-family condos. Then there is another blue feature that's right behind the condos. That's a dry pond feature, tentatively. And then you get to the actual condo buildings themselves. So some of it's wetland, some of it's wet pond, some of it's dry pond.
Which means that it won't be manicured. The dry ponds will be left as quote-unquote wetlands.
Well, dry pond is an area that isn't wetland, so the wetlands will be left as wetlands.
Okay.
The dry pond is outside the wetland, and usually the city spec on most ponds, dry or wet, is a lot of times prairie plantings. So natural wildflower kind of stuff, but not just let to grow wild, actually a very specific seed mix.
Okay.
That's not weedy and garbagey.
So trees, tree cover, tree line, that isn't really part of that plan then?
It isn't, but you could, if there's space, you could line that dry pond feature with some landscaping. It just depends on how the grades work out.
And so what does the builder do and have responsibility for as far as kind of to respond to this woman's concerns? What do they have, just goodwill?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably more so a topic of the building site and operation plan, which is the next resolution item, same project, but this question really is, are we okay with 80 units in 2-family and 4-family at this density? That's really the topic for item number 39.
Okay.
The next item, which is really one and the same, that's where you get into the site approval stuff. There could be an amendment there to say, yes, provide, as much screening as can fit. They have to come up with whatever kind of wording you'd want, but I'm sure, from what I've heard,
I
that
get leeway on discussions and when they're right next to each other, because questions are gonna come up, but really for this part of the meeting, we really are looking at the zoning. change
Got it.
on this, right? If I go forward with the next one, if you're not gonna do the zoning.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, I think my concern was just that at this stage, I guess if we are concerned about it, I mean, it's a PD, so there's not a lot of goodwill there. It's almost a negotiation. So, PD puts us in a good spot in some regard versus straight out zoning. So I don't have an issue with the density. It's far better than what the combination alone is. So that I'm happy to see. I just want to make sure that if we move forward onto the BSO, we can still adjust the detention, because it's my understanding that the detention pond, which is the dry pond, right? That I think you could put you could plant more there, around there to possibly transition better. So as long as passing this first one doesn't inhibit us from having that discussion, I'm fine.
Yeah, so we're really talking about density. On
Yep.
this. I mean, one point that Commissioner didn't bring up.
the microphone. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I hit the button by accident. One thing that petitioner didn't bring up is the density of this proposal is actually less dense than Champions Village. So, you look at the subdivision that's right there, there's less density in what's being proposed here. I mean, my only hang up on when as far as the zoning part of it, when this was brought up is, I don't like taking some of the little commercial zoning we have in this community and converting it to residential. There is a part in here that was commercial zoning, so you could have, picture what you could have in front of your house if that portion was being used for commercial. But it's such a weird fit, and there'd be a lot of pushback from the neighborhood on whatever would go in there, even though it's there by right, so.
Well, we did discuss that during one of the conceptuals that we really don't want, I don't think the area wanted to see commercial or industry there. So that I think we had, and I appreciate the petitioners coming in and we're working through that. So that, I just want to acknowledge that I recall. So, but thank you, that was a good point.
Much improved design
Yeah.
from what we've seen in the past, yes.
So,
Absolutely.
So regarding the density and the zoning, any other comments? Anything else the petitioner wants to add?
I would only say that for relativity, the Glen at Pellman Farm on Woods Road, that is essentially a 2.99 density or 3 per acre there, and this is 2.2. So for something that you could visualize, similar product, it's
More spread out.
about 40% more dense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd agree. The density looks really actually great. We wouldn't have many discussions about density. I don't think if developments came in at this spot. I'm comfortable moving forward with this so long as approving this density doesn't limit us in the next step, whereby we might ask to adjust 6, 7, 8, and 9 and slide things down or move things around slightly to give a little bit more distance in preservation of the tree line to the north. So if that hamstrings us, I've been down this path, I guess, many times on planning commission, where we vote this through and then the next step, they're like, well, too bad you approved it. You gotta figure out how to get it now. And that's never a spot I like being in. So as long as there's some comfort level from the developer to be able to adjust slightly the locations of these buildings, possibly sliding them a little bit, or working with us to do landscape around the back, then I think I could move to to approve that, but I guess my question is to the developer, do you see some potential here to help on building 6, 7, and 8 with that?
I'm not certain.
Okay.
I'll just reiterate that we'll be more than a football field away from that home, 90 feet more, so 130 yards
But the
away.
goal would be to preserve that tree line, right, that's out
Yeah,
there right now?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sir,
And-
wait, you can't, you have to, you
And,
can't
and,
go.
and if it, and, you know, if we would need to look at the landscaping a little more diligently for some additional trees, we certainly would.
Okay.
I mean, we've been through this.
Yeah.
And I get it.
Yeah, it's a long way.
I appreciate that. However, I could cite 50 other developments here that the football field just is not enough.
Mm.
They want to maintain the tree line or a berm or something, so,
Mm.
right, they're also preserving every, if we can.
Mhm.
If you want to add something, you can come up to the mic, but you have to come up to the microphone and say your name. And then state your name again.
Our concern isn't that the houses are going to be there, but what you're doing is you're disrupting the existing landscaping that currently exists. Right now, when we're looking out our windows or we're in our backyard during the warm weather, the deciduous trees have leaves on them. We have no view of Highway 36. What's being proposed is you're going to clear that land, as my wife said. And I'm looking at that property right now from Muskego Lakes Golf Course. If you look to the north, you can see Ryan Road. That did not exist before that development occurred. That land is totally cleared, it's level ground. Our concern is that you're going to do the same thing with this, and we're going to look at rooftops of houses, and then beyond that, we're going to see Highway 36. We want that landscape to be that we still have that natural setting. That's our only concern. Put houses there, but why do you have to disrupt the landscape so greatly? I mean, you're going to clear the land, is what I was told. I talked to Adam from the Planning Commission, that all that tree line is going to get removed. I don't understand why that has to occur. That's our biggest concern.
Understood.
So,
Thank you. I will address that to a point. And there's really no soft way of saying this, but the landowner has rights to develop it. Actually, the rights that are there are much more they're much more blunt than what they're being proposed right now. The same things that you're complaining about on what could happen here, somebody else that has an older home, probably say up on Ryan Road, could say about your house. Development will happen in areas, and the best way to stop development from happening is owning and controlling the land. But when you don't do that, the view you're guaranteed is the one of within your own property. I understand what you're saying, but we do have Muskego's got some, and I'm not going to. We can't have this debate back and forth here, but. You know, quite honestly, the development that's coming here is much more, less dense, less, it's a better view than you would have by what's there by right. So, sir, we can't go back and forth like that. Any other questions? Can you do a roll call vote?
Sure. Commissioner Graff,
Yay.
Alderman Kubaki,
Aye.
Commissioner Buckmaster,
Aye.
Commissioner Bartlett,
Aye.
Mayor Pitfalski.
Aye.
Item passes 5-0 for the rezoning and land use amendment.
Thank you. Moving on to resolution PC 040-2020, approving building site and operation for Cornerstone Development located immediately to the north of Loomis Road to the west of Champions Drive.
I'll second.
Discussion.
The dry area is on the north end outside of the boundaries of this complex, correct?
Yes, it's within the development boundary of this proposal. It's north of the northernmost units in that section of the development.
And the trees that are in there now are not valuable trees.
Well, I don't know the type of trees, but it's a small, thin tree line. Like you said, you typically see like separating two farmers' fields maybe or something like that. It's not a woods per se. It's not a cluster of trees. It's a line that literally separated two farmers' fields.
It's not maintained by anyone right now.
Oh, no.
Right.
This is wild. This
No,
is
yeah.
wild and.
So those trees are outside the boundaries of the development anyway.
Well, they're in they're in this project area. They are in this project area.
Oh, they are in the project
Yes.
area.
And where the back of the proposed buildings are proposed would sit about where this tree line is, and then north of that tree line, so towards the subdivision, is where that dry pond feature is tentatively proposed. Now, keep in mind, when it comes to the dry pond and stuff, that's just preliminary design. Obviously, as they refine their site plan approval, that could change.
Sure.
But one thing I can tell you from experience too, you don't need a lot to have certain types of landscaping. Clearly, you don't want to block drainage with landscaping. That's a big no-no. But if they do have this dry feature, you have units on one side, then this dry feature, I'd be apt to think typically, there's going to be probably some kind of berm feature because they have to prevent this dry pond from emptying directly into the wetland. It may go there indirectly eventually, but it's not meant to be one and the same. So there's probably going to be some kind of elevated feature between the wetlands and this pond feature. There's very well a chance you could do landscaping, and I'm not talking about a forest, but a line of landscaping probably on that elevated feature.
Sure.
And we could look at that when the grading plan would get reviewed, and I'm sure if the engineers that are reviewing it on our side are aware that there's a concern of, hey, we want to have more screening here, if that's the case, they can probably work with the designers of the project to say, okay, what can we do with the grading that works for the purpose of the grading, but also works to allow some area for additional landscaping
Sure.
potential.
I've worked with Cornerstone in the past, and I know they're amenable to those types of
That's correct.
changes. Yeah.
One thing I'll just kind of go over, since I didn't really talk about it before, just to kind of hit on the architecture and stuff a little bit. This part of the approval is the architecture and stuff. These buildings will look literally identical to the buildings that you see on their development right now that's on Woods Road at the Glen and Pellman Farms, which you'll see on the renderings off on the side. So very good four-sided architecture. For the most part, they really did a pretty good job of making sure the garages face other garages and not face other neighbors. So you'll notice that on the site plan. As I mentioned, there are some site features like the trail, like the pocket park that was mentioned, the clubhouse, the pool, that kind of stuff. But as far as an architecture goes and as far as a building composition goes, like I said, it will look just like what we saw at the other development. There are a couple options owners can choose as far as, do they want a sunroom, do they want a den, do they not? So not every building ends up looking exactly the same because you can have a little bit of option depending on what a buyer would choose. But it's very indicative of what you see already built. So that's a great example of, if someone wants to see what it's going to look like, you can already look at a real world version of it. So I guess, you want to just talk about that. Parking's handled. They have attached garages. They have off-street parking. Like I said, roads are going to be private. They do have a approximate landscape plan right now, but that's something that's going to have a lot of refining as the grading and stuff gets worked out further on this project. They will also be doing some utility extensions for water and sewer as part of this development. So there's just a few key points I wanted to make sure we talk about as part of this BSO.
Go ahead.
So I think, and thank you for that added information on the forestry, because the part that I'm looking at that the good lady is concerned about is probably the low priority area. I don't know, it could be swamp type trees or, right? And so it's not managed. However, if you look at that detention pond, I'm almost certain you can work that through because they just drain so slow, and it looks like a pretty good sized pond. And I'm almost certain something can be worked out to keep some semblance of a tree line there. And now the risk of that though is that whatever tree line is there, it's not managed. So it could be there day one, and then over time, it is what it is. So that's the risk, I guess, of leaving any kind of a tree line there that doesn't have high priority to it. So based on the city's plan. So I'm fine with that. I think your development over on Woods Road is just spot on.
Thank you.
It's just absolutely
Thank you.
spot on. And so I have no doubt it's going to be quality. It's just, I would just defer this to the building department, right?
yeah, I mean,
when
if-
you're doing stormwater retention, they can work this out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is if the plan commission, it sounds like what I may be hearing is that, I think the consensus, kind of is, hey, let's see what we can do to beef up landscaping in that area in working with the grading. You claimed what the grading is going to allow. If that's something that the plan commission so wished, it would probably be good to have that as an amendment, as that way then we can pass that specific, whatever verbiage you want to choose to the review engineers. So when they are reviewing the grading plans, they can keep that in mind. And same thing when staff reviews the landscape plans, we can keep that in mind also.
And I sense we're all in concert with that. I think that's a good idea.
I'll move to amend.
Yeah.
Yep.
Could I get a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor of the motion to amend, say aye.
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 Opposed? Passes unanimously. Any further discussion?
Is your discussion with the DOT completed? So you're going to have a turn lane going to the south? Okay, and no adjustments from the turn lane?
Right.
coming- Okay.
Well, right, that's how I understand it, and
Yeah, I haven't heard what the DOT, the conversations that I was involved with more so were about a secondary access. Yeah, I don't know if you talked more with them about any improvements. I would think they'd want something here as far as Excel, decel, I don't know. I don't remember what's there.
diesel, yeah.
So, yeah, they'll be required before they can do any construction on our side to provide us any kind of DOT permitting or comments, just so we're all on the same page and know how we're reviewing it. Yeah.
I would think that the amount of traffic that's brought in by this is a fraction of what's already there from the golf course.
Right. And
Anything's an improvement.
the road to the golf course, will that be improved right to their lot, their parking lot?
Right.
Okay.
mhm.
Actually,
And
Well, no, not their
it's
lot.
only being improved to the northern end of this new development.
Okay.
So you'll kind of get to a part where we'll kind of
To the
end,
end of our, right,
Okay,
to the end of.
and then the driveway will kind of just
property we
extend
were
off
on.
the end, going to the golf course.
Right.
okay, thank you.
And built to public standards.
Sure.
That'll change it some.
So it's not going to have holes in the road anymore?
Actually, yeah, they're really welcoming that.
I also want to mention, the petitioner had talked about that pocket park up there. That is not going to be a city park, so it's going to be a private park.
Oh, I figured that. Yeah.
It's fine.
Thank you for clarifying that.
My feeling was the homeowners association is maintaining the property and will have a property manager. So their oversight of the park seems to be logical and really probably not much of an extension beyond, looking over the whole property as it is anyway.
Now, with that being a private park, did you make arrangements is it just for use of your subdivision, or are you allowing?
I think we're going to write into the declaration that we will allow that others can use that,
Okay.
but we have to respect, the rules and regulations as set forth for that pocket park.
All right.
That way we don't get into somebody policing it for neighbors who are welcome there.
Yeah, no, it was a question. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, you want to do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Commissioner Graff,
Aye.
Alderman Kubaki,
Aye.
Commissioner Buckmaster,
Aye.
Commissioner Bartlett,
Aye.
Mayor Pitfalski.
Aye.
Resolution approved.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Moving on to Resolution PC 42-2020, approval of a metal accessory structure for Stephen Aaron Christensen located on Northview Drive.
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion. Adam.
All right. So this accessory building is in front of the Plan Commission tonight because of the proposed exterior materials, as the Plan Commission I'm sure recalls. Exterior materials and colors are supposed to be similar or the same as the home. So in this scenario, the applicant has about 1.49 acres. They're proposing 1,200 square foot accessory structure. They are looking at doing a metal pole building, so metal roof, metal walls. Normally, the code talks about, like I said, colors and materials matching. In this scenario, they are asking for the material waiver to do the metal material. The Plan Commission, for recollection sake, has approved metal outbuildings on this road as recently as early this year. So, with a little bit bigger lots, this is on a dead end. There's farming in the area, not on the lot, so it definitely a metal building I don't think would look out of place at all here, especially since there's some other ones on the road. It's kind of set back from the house, with at least 140 feet back from the road. The only one question that staff really saw on this item that wanted to see if the Plan Commission had any questions or comments or concerns related to the color. So they're proposing clay mist, or it's like a tannish gray color with a brown metal roof that has trim and wainscoting. The current house is like beige and with a brown roof. And the applicant has talked about not matching colors because in the future, at some point, we don't know when, they were talking about changing the color of the house to match the building. So their goal would be to match eventually. It's just not matching now. And the Plan Commission has the ability to approve different colors. We've approved, traditional barn red and things like that. So that's the only question. Right now, the resolution is written to approve it as proposed with the different colors. But just if the Plan Commission has any other comments, concerns, questions.
So hearing that, are there any comments, questions, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to Resolution PC 043-2020, approval of a certified survey map for Kenneth Belmore located on Racine Avenue.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Adam will give us an update in a moment.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up this certified survey map on the screen here. So this project came before the Plan Commission, I think it was about 5 years ago or so, as a conceptual review. The Belmore family has 2 lots. I think they originally wanted some time, and then they were reconfigured into 2 lots as part of a legal lot status, which was kind of an older rule the city had, which has since been gone. So it is 2 lots. There's 2 homes. Each home is on its own respective lot. But since the properties were owned by family over the years, if you look on the map, you'll kind of see that some of the buildings are on other properties and vice versa. The garage for one of the houses is on the other property. Because it was family, it was never an issue. The owners are looking to kind of clean things up right now. And in the conceptual review, which is very similar to this review, there's really not a lot of question that originally was there. The only point that was originally kind of brought up is if you look at the survey map on the left side, there's an area where the back lot, if you want to call it that, narrows pretty significantly. The code requires 80 feet of frontage, and we typically like to interpret that to mean 80 feet all the way to the back of the lot where the minimum average width is then met. In this scenario, they are asking for reduction. When the applicant originally ran their numbers, they kind of were expecting this reduction to be about a 40-foot or so width. Once the surveyor actually put the numbers to paper, and once all the setbacks and offsets were met for the detached garage, that number is narrowed down closer to 20 feet. So it would start with the 80 feet, it would narrow down to 20, and then it would widen out to the minimum average width as required. So it meets the zoning code. The question is that land division narrowness. The Plan Commission definitely can approve that. There are easements for the driveway, since the driveway on this property does cross over the other property. Easements for driveways are very common, so that's nothing abnormal. The only other thing we wanted to bring up that's a little bit unconventional, but this is really a private thing that would be between the 2 lot owners, is the idea that you'll see kind of a hatching in the back area of the lot. That hatching will be part of the front lot, for lack of a better term, but the people that own the back lot would have the right to use it. And that line kind of reflects how the yards are used. There is a berm there, there's a fire pit feature. So this would be something that the city doesn't necessarily recommend or doesn't disallow or anything like that. It's really a private thing between 2 people. Down the road, if one owner has a question with the other owner, it's a private easement between the 2. So it's not something that's conventional, but it's also not something our code says you can't have because it's private. It's really not a decision we should make, but it is something that's a little out of the norm, that is a little bit new to the city. Otherwise, we're recommending approval if the Plan Commission has any other concerns.
Why the other easement next to the garage?
That's for the access. The driveway to service the back house currently goes over that location. And rather than relocate the driveway, they have an easement for access. That's something that's
It's fairly
common, yeah.
Okay. Just looks strange on the map.
I have no issues.
No.
Commissioner Bartlett, anything?
Nothing, no.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. You have your 2 lots. Moving on to PC 044-2020, discussion of a conceptual certified survey map for Dave Weiss located on Northview Drive.
All right, this item is just a conceptual discussion, so we don't need any motions or anything. And as a reminder to the Plan Commission, conceptual discussions are things that the applicant can ask for without spending too much money to get some basic feedback. You know, they know they don't get a yes or no. They know they're going to just get conversation and discussion and feedback. So to give you a little bit of overview, this property is located, it would be like at the end of Northview Drive. So Northview Drive right now dead ends into this gentleman's property. And what he's proposing is to split the single lot into two lots. One for himself, where his current home is, which is on the west side of the property, and the east side would be for one of his children to build a home on in the future. The reason we had to come for a conceptual review was there's really two questions at hand that I think are the most important to discuss. Number one would be the idea that as part of this process, right now, the right-of-way that's dedicated dead ends into his property. But the cul-de-sac bulb itself is actually quite a bit shy of his property. So as part of the land division, we've advised the owner, per the land division ordinance, he will have to definitely dedicate at a minimum a cul-de-sac bulb that meets our design standards into his property, which will give him the proper frontage on a right-of-way for the two lots. But the question number one then is, does the applicant have to actually extend the road and extend the cul-de-sac bulb from where it is into the newly dedicated location? This is something that, Plan Commission should give some weigh-in on. Down the road, Public Works Committee may weigh in on this also, and eventually on a final CSM, council would be involved. But kind of wanted to get the take of the Plan Commission of, would we expect him for the one new lot to extend a road and a cul-de-sac bulb? And then question two would be, the ordinance that we have in the city talks about when lots adjacent have land division potential, you're supposed to provide extensions, whether it's roadways or utilities if practical, to those adjacent properties. So looking here, the bike trail's to the north, so nothing's really happening there. So that really leaves you east or west. When you look westward, that property would probably be not too practical to make a connection to, number one, because of the existing home on the property. And the second item would be that that property is very large and has a lot of road frontage right now, so access to that property to the west is not a concern. So providing another access point is probably not necessary, as well as that land has a connection to the Bell Chase subdivision that could be connected some way. Now, as you look eastward, to the east of this is remnant land that's on the back half of Muskego Lakes Middle School. When that project for the middle school was done, it was always kind of the staff and city's assumption that that leftover land would probably not be left over forever, and it would probably be some kind of residential development. That's what the land use plans in the area around there recommend. Obviously, it would need a rezoning and such because it is zoned for a school now, but that land makes sense if you're looking at the big plan, unless the school needs it for some kind of facility for it to probably be a single-family residential development. So the recommendation of staff would probably be to provide some type of right-of-way dedication leading to that land so that if it ever does develop, it would give another means of access. Just like with the middle school, we never want to have really long dead end, one way in, one way out only. So this would provide another access. Now, at the same time, staff would recommend not requiring the developer to improve this because he shouldn't be improving something for a what if, but at least provide the land dedication so if a road's ever needed, the land's set aside for it.
Is the petitioner here? Do you want to add anything?
Dave Weiss. I understand the need for possibly two entries to that property, but I do also have concerns about that too. One of the ideas is that Northview Drive is a dead end. I bought this 30 acres 17 years ago just to have peace and quiet. All the neighbors asked me at one time, was I going to develop it? Because there were plans to develop this a while back. And I said, absolutely not. My goal is to keep it like it is and maybe build a house for me and my couple of kids. And that's all I've ever wanted to do. If the property to the east is going to develop, they can buy another house on Acker or on Highview and make another access that way too. They don't have to necessarily come through my property. That Northview is a very quiet road, And if you've ever been on Highview recently, since they put in the middle school, it's like a highway in the morning and in the afternoon. Literally a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit with people going 40 down on it most of the time. I wouldn't want that coming through my property. And so I understand that, but I would also want to understand what the school's going to do, who's going to be the developer, all that stuff before I would actually dedicate land to doing that. Because right now, honestly, the school shouldn't be developing land. The school should just sell the land if they want to get rid of it to a developer who will develop it. I mean, we don't spend our tax money to have schools develop land. So I would actually be opposed to that portion of giving that right away at this point in time without anything. Now, I have reached out to the school district, and I've had some conversations with, I believe it's Jeremy Johnson, and asked what the intent with the land is, and he said they don't know, but yet the city is meeting with them to talk about it. Something, you're going to have a meeting in the short-term future here to discuss that. And I've also just said, you know, what do you want to do with it? Because a lot of the people around would like to see it conserved. You know, they don't want to see a lot of development. We enjoy it the way it is right now.
So the right-of-way that Adam's talking about would go from,
Would go from essentially the
North
cul-de-sac
to
bulb
east?
somewhere up to the east. I don't know
Okay.
exactly where it would go. We can't without, I mean, we could say it goes along that tree line or whatever, but I wouldn't want to do that to my neighbors either. I think that's kind of cruel to
Because
have
aren't the utilities on Highview anyway?
utilities.
The overhead?
Yeah.
Water's there.
Water's there?
Water and everything.
Water's there?
There's water on Highview that was the second route for the school, the bypass or whatever it
Yep.
was,
Yeah.
but it doesn't come down Northview at all.
Okay.
And I talked to I don't know which department it was, but about the sewer, and the sewer can handle a couple of houses on it. I mean, beyond that, developing that land, there's a lift station that would have to go in, all kinds of things. So I don't even know whether it's feasible or if there's enough pitch to get to where the school put improvements in at this point in time, whoever would develop, if they develop to the east. I'm just trying to build a house for my daughter. That's all I want to do.
I'd be hard pressed to suggest that we have to put easement over your shoulders for something we don't know will ever.
Well, the school district we did have that meeting with them. Their long-term plan is to, well, they don't have anything set, but they would like to do something with the land, have it sold off as a development or something like
Okay.
that. And they have indicated that's what they want to do.
But are we
and-
going to shoulder him with the
Well,
responsibility to offer up an
That's
easement?
been the practice of what we do when we when land gets divided, if it's adjoining to a developable or a piece of property that's going to be developed, that we require the dedication. We're not requiring them to build the road or anything else, which actually has been done for short stubs in the past, but it's just putting the road dedication. I mean, they're throughout this whole community. They're all over. Not all of them get used.
Yeah, we have tons of these that exist all over that some of them never get built.
That never happened.
Right.
Yeah, some
The
do, some don't.
developer comes in and says, no, we're not going to.
There's one going down Lannon, where Lannon tees off on the Martin, dedicated road that goes all the way through.
Okay, all right.
Is the idea to have two different ingresses to that developable?
We always
property?
wanted, the ordinance does have a recommended limit, the land division ordinance for maximum dead-end cul-de-sac length. So we always try, that's something I think a handful of the council members have brought up at different times when we've had land divisions proposed was, we've had a couple members that kind of always hang their head on how long is that cul-de-sac, how long? Because they know you start running into safety issues if you only have a one-way. We love to have four ways in, you know what I mean? But we know that's not practical either. So yeah, we always strive from a police, fire, or just general planning, engineering standpoint to have more than one connection point, because it's just common sense safer if you can have more than one way in or out.
But it's not, I would also extend that it's not my responsibility to increase the value of the school's property. Because by dedicating my land to that, it increases the value of that property. Right now, they actually have no access to that land except for just like you had talked about in this Cornerstone development, they have a regular 15-foot, 12-foot wide road out, emergency exit. That's all they have. So they actually don't even have an access to that currently, to that land. So there's no deeded road to that land, nothing. And so to saddle me with having to give them access to that land, see that they didn't build any access to that land, is there something from the school that is already deeded access to that land?
Well, where they have that easement, they own that entire property and home.
But
realistically, that home would probably come, in my guess, would probably come down and they would dedicate a right of way through there, which they'd have the right to do as they own it.
But currently it's not a right of way.
No, it's an easement.
Right away, but the land, even without the house, has the setbacks to be able to put a road to city specs through.
Granted.
With the land that's there. So they do have an access.
Yeah, and in the end, this decision, if this land division were to go through, is ultimately a common council decision. And the ordinance does say they're supposed to provide it. So it'd be a question of still, giving the owner any feedback.
So maybe I'm confused. So then what I just heard, and maybe I'm not understanding, but wouldn't that be 3 access points then to this property?
So the potential would be maybe one here, the topic here, and then where the emergency access right now that services the kind of the back of the middle school,
Yeah.
that land there is owned by the district, school district. Either that specific driveway or some other road could possibly be requested there, so it'd be 2. They wouldn't connect with the school itself because the school itself does not have right of way. So it would be kind of from behind the school.
Okay, so there was a right-of-way that was granted, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought when we approved the school that to the south down to Highview Drive.
It's an easement through a property the district bought.
Yes.
Yeah,
So is
that's
there-
what would be converted potentially down the road. I'm just thinking of what if.
Okay, so again, I'm just gonna ask the question, maybe I'm confused again, but doesn't that mean that we're asking for 3 access points?
No, it would be that one through that easement area and one off of Northview potentially.
But what he's saying is
One off
technically,
of Highview and one off the school.
Not off the school, off of Highview. Nothing, the school and the residential development we would never want connected.
but it still could be an access point from the school. It's their property.
Why couldn't it be?
Why no?
Not the emergency access.
The theory would be the emergency access would be converted to a road,
Right.
a public road,
Okay.
that would service the subdivision, and you're right, there'd probably be a stem off of that for emergency purposes going back to the school.
But,
That's all
and,
it could handle.
and vice versa, you could, when you make that the road, you could make the emergency exit back to the school district. Just like you did in the Cornerstone one going up to the other subdivision, Belch, or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my question was the same as Jeremy's here. I don't know what, I guess I see 2 potential, or 1 potential access down in that house that we own. And usually that is common. What we would do is just suggest that is very common to have that dedicated for future development. So that's good. In this case, I'm not too concerned, I guess, about that. One, because it's going to take years before the school even knows what to do with that. Our master planning is frozen. There's nothing being done until after COVID and this pandemic is done. And then our facility use plan is being restudied based on the needs going forward. So we don't know what we're going to need land for by late June or here. So, I'm guessing it could be a year or 2 before we even know and can say, yes, we're going to do this or no, or we're going to sell it or what.
So you're suggesting that
I don't think
this isn't necessary?
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
think it's-
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because just based on that and what we're entertaining now, I agree, we shouldn't be saddled with it. I think there's plenty of options there to, even if the district sold it, there are still an option there on that. And that would be the school district's choice, not private property owner. In this case, just because of that, there is that optional access there. That wasn't there, then I would be in favor of what the dedication is.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
And we're bringing this forward because it is the ordinance, so.
No, I agree.
So
It-
you have to weigh in on this, it's not, we have,
No, we are just recommending here that having.
Council.
I do understand Adam has explained that to me very thoroughly.
All right.
And then I guess, so, okay, I think if there's any more discussion on that one, I think the second question that I think would be helpful for the owner is the idea of, if you look at the kind of the view that's up now, you can kind of see where, towards the bottom, you see little orange dots as Northview, you can see a cul-de-sac bulb there. the question would be is, if he does this, the ordinance also requires that the road be extended and the bulb be placed in the new bulb dedication that he'd have to do no matter what, at basically where Northview ends. Would you think your recommendation would be to extend that paving or just allow the new additional driveway for his child to just be split off the existing driveway? Ultimately, Public Works probably has that final call, but I think it's good to chime in so the owner knows what he might have ahead of him. And we've had it go both ways. Even though the ordinance talks about improving it, there have been a few occasions where it's been just for one more lot that they say it's not practical to extend a road for one lot.
Just view this long-term. We're not immortal, none of us. So, who owns the land now may not be the same. I know his daughter's getting it. Things change. So look long-term and, what you want to do.
We do have a lot of private roads throughout the city, and I don't have a problem with that. If that were to be further developed in the future, then I could see us taking some action.
So there's a couple options on this is what you could do. You could require him to extend it out to city road specs. You could have him leave at least dedicated land that if this does get developed out in the future, that the land is already there dedicated for that bulb and the road. Or you can just let them split it out and leave it as is. So you really kind of have three options.
The bulb dedication has to occur, otherwise it won't meet the land division ordinance. So he'll have to dedicate the bulb no matter what.
Yeah.
That's minimal. It's like 60 or 70 foot radius.
Okay.
So but otherwise it won't meet but he doesn't have to improve it. That's the other part.
And I don't mind dedicating the land for the bulb. That's not a problem at all.
I would agree with Alderman. I don't think it's an issue. If down the road it gets sold and someone wants to re-subdivide and to develop it, they bear the cost.
Sure, and we've got the dedication for the bulb anyway, so, yeah.
And what we could do is, if a final CSM would formally come through, we could always place a note on it that says if any addition, this is very common, if any additional land division occur, then the road extension must occur or something. That's very common on land divisions.
Yeah.
I like that.
Just don't build any more homes for your kids.
No, because it's just a discussion, so we'll just put it in the minutes.
You have a friendly crowd here. I hope it's the same.
Thanks. Well, one of your city employees actually lives just on the other side of Northview over there, and I don't know that Gwen lives right there. I don't know that she'd like to see that road widened and come within 50 feet of her house, but
She hasn't said anything yet.
I don't know that she knows that. But I've always looked out for the neighbors, so.
We appreciate that.
All right. Anything further? This was just a discussion item anyway, so. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Moving on to resolution PC 046-2020, approval of a building site and operation amendment for Pops Marketplace located on Janesville Road.
Is that what it is?
Move to approve.
Second.
All right. So this project here is a building site and operation plan amendment for what was formerly the Bosse's Market, now called Pops Marketplace. I'm sure many of you know the name of Pops, Popcorn and Pops Kettle Corn, locally, proud local business. They've looked at taking over, they're currently already involved in taking over this space. They have their business registration already, and they're currently operating out of the building, retail business, selling a lot of different local products, Wisconsin products and things like that. They've also had kind of two, what we call test run beer gardens that they hosted with Mobcraft to kind of, they want to really promote outdoor activities here. And that's really the main reason that they're in front of us tonight. The interior operations aren't a question for the Plan Commission. It's really more so what they want to do outside. And as you guys know, the outdoor activities are subject to Plan Commission review. So the area that currently houses, there's been, if you've been there in the fall where they have their pumpkins and stuff, and they have some activities and a playground and some, I think goats were there last time I was there. That's the area they really want to focus on, is having be their outdoor area. They're looking at building 20 by 20 open-sided pergola to kind of give some, shade feature for some of the patrons. They want to have potentially markets, whether it's like farmers markets or mini markets in this general, outside area. So it really kind of, there's two parts. There's the part where you'll have like tables and the playground and the pergola. And then just east of it is an area that they've kind of identified as a bring your own chair area. So it's kind of a field, but it would be separate from the parking area, mowed field, I should say. And that way people can bring their own chairs. Given the current pandemic situation, they can spread out as much as they're comfortable. And so it kind of gives a really big option area to do stuff outdoors. As part of it, they're looking at possibly having food trucks on a pretty regular basis, as far as having possibly most weekdays at lunch, but also on some, weekend or extended weekend times for some of the events they were hoping to have out there. They still would continue any of the fall events that have normally been done at the Bosse Market, so that wouldn't be impacted any form. They would still kind of keep that tradition here. The farm uses, the mulch sales, all those things that have been ongoing in the past will still continue. So they're not really taking anything away. If anything, they're just adding and enhancing what's going on that property, indoors and out. A few of the things that we've kind of seen and heard from, from being out there and people at the events, it sounds like all the stuff they've done up to this point have been very successful. And it was kind of good to have the trial run, if you want to call it that, for the beer gardens. We can kind of see, the owner, like lessons learned kind of scenario of what works good, what doesn't. So they're proposing, that when they would have beer garden events, it'd usually be around the 5 to 9 o'clock time slot. They would potentially, like I said, have some, food truck vendors or mini farm markets either on weekdays and or weekends. And as part of this approval, we'd basically be giving them approval for kind of any of these mentioned options at any time they want outside. If they're doing anything with outdoor music, that does have to involve the clerk's office, as there's an outside dance permit they have to get. But other than that, pretty much at their will, they'd be allowed to have these different noted events in the respective areas. So the site plan kind of talks about what happens where. For restrooms, they're talking about currently just using portable toilets for this year. They don't want to obviously go ahead and build a big bathroom facility. They want to see how this kind of pans out over the next year. So we looked at this approval as being a 2020 approval. And the resolutions actually listed that they would be required to come back in the off season, winter season, to make kind of refine their plan further. So right now, for example, there is, a little more than a dozen parking stalls that are paved. Well, our ordinance talks about all stalls being paved, but historically, because of the, pumpkin farm operations, there's a large area that's been used for grass parking seasonally. They're asking that remain through this season. So there is an area that's kind of roped off right now that should be grass parking. Staff is okay with that on a temporary basis, but we definitely think that that's something that, if this were to continue to grow next year, as we think it might, and hopefully it does, we would definitely look to maybe have that be maybe gravel or paving at some point, as that's the long-term goal. We look at maybe having some permanent restroom facilities more than just porta-johns for now. But like I said, the business is starting, so you want to have them be able to succeed without breaking the bank right up front. As far as a couple things that are in the resolution that we wanted to really mention, they've mentioned that they've talked to Pro Healthcare as far as getting approval for overflow parking after 5 p.m. on weekdays and on weekends to use their parking, which we don't have a problem with. But the thing, we just want to make sure that we have a formal written agreement. We received a draft of agreement. There's some questions in it. We just want to make sure we have a formal agreement and that the Plan Commission can't endorse shared parking until we would have a formal agreement. So the resolution's listed as such. It's noted that these activities are only for 2020 and that for anything 2021, it's outdoors, we'll have to come back to the Plan Commission for let's see where we're at and a follow-up and see what should change or improve, if anything. A couple things are also noted in the resolution. We definitely noted that any kind of vendors, food trucks should only be parked, and there's a designated kind of area that used to be a greenhouse for those wood chips. I know that there was one event lately we heard about where they had a really successful food truck there, but where it was parked actually blocked a lot of the parking, so people couldn't park in all the spots they could have, and I know it kind of got a little hairy with traffic. So we're just making sure that if a food truck is there, if they're doing a farmer's market, any kind of outdoor vendors, that they be out of the parking lot, either grass or paving, so those can solely be reserved for customers. They have that whole bring your own chair area as well as the mulch area that could be ample space for either food trucks. If they were to have a beer garden, a beer vendor, if they were to have a farmer's market, those vendors. So those are a couple of things that are in the resolution, but staff thinks this is a great improvement. And I think it's gonna be a great business. We're recommending approval just subject to some of those concerns, and then stressing it's a 2020 approval and that the operator would come back for anything 2021 or later.
Well written. I fully agree. I think in the atmosphere that we have right now with the COVID virus around, we need these recreational opportunities, and I think it's a great opportunity for the city and for this gentleman.
I love this. I mean, I went to it last
So
week.
did I. It was
and,
great.
Yeah, this is what people are looking for, is this type of thing. I'm almost hesitant to allow Mr. Knudsen to come up here because right now it looks like we've got some pretty positive things. You might talk yourselves out of it, but do you want to come up and say anything?
Address, is that right?
Yep.
Mark Knutson, S7, we just moved into Muskego, so now actually S77W17605 on St. Leonard's Drive. It's been awesome. It's really good. Appreciate everything that we've gotten back from Adam and I have been talking, Aaron and I have been talking, Rick, you and I have been talking. It's gotten a lot of great feedback. Really excited about this space. Unfortunately, right now, though, with the spot when it comes down to the beer gardens and stuff, we won't be doing too much of that just because the actual landlords themselves won't allow us to with alcohol, but we're doing other things without alcohol. So it's one of those spots where we continue to want to have those kind of events. So we're talking about mocktail Mondays, things like that, where we can bring music and mocktails in and stuff like that. But overall, we've had a great success. I really appreciate the support from the city. It's a great space, and as I said, it's just going to be a fun little spot, and we'll see what we can kind of create here amongst quite a crazy kind of time. So yeah.
Who's the hot dog guy there? The guy in that cart that gives those Chicago dogs?
Yeah, he's
Those are, I mean,
Grandpa
absolutely
Pete,
fantastic.
he's awesome. He's usually actually up over on National.
Really?
And he's a fantastic guy. Him and his wife come down, and they're going to be there every Saturday.
Yeah, three of them.
It's a great venue.
I couldn't.
Three of them?
These things were awesome.
Ran out. That's why.
That's why.
When I got there, he's
I
like,
mean,
cancer too.
these things were awesome. And I was like, hey, this is
40
pretty
hot
good.
dogs.
And I do also, I appreciate and respect also the blockage of the part that was milk can. I know exactly the day it was. It was on Wednesday last week, and it just went AWOL. And I keep kind of forgetting what kind of following they have, but we've got some great food trucks that are coming in, and they appreciate being able to have a space like this as well within the city, just because of all these events that are getting canceled. This is exactly what we've discussed, and I think it's going to be great for the city and just for all the different community members. So yeah, we've had a great success so far, and looking forward to more.
Yeah, and this is a perfect example why we kind of did a little bit of this trial, which was great because it's lesson learned, and it was a problem. It was just something that was noticed. And yeah, like I said, now everyone knows, okay, just food truck, just maybe move a little bit over, and now people can park more, and it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, and any feedback coming forward and stuff like that, please just keep feeding it to us so that we can keep making changes and making sure that this is a positive part of the community. I do have the updated from Pro Health.
Yeah, that's fine.
I've got that updated because I think they put on their Brookfield address.
Sure, yeah.
on
You can just
accident,
email that to
but
us.
It's just the Muskego one, and they've been nothing but great for it. We don't want to be contingent on that, but it is great to have that overflow parking just in case anything kind of comes up, especially even weather-wise, all that kind of stuff, just to respect the land and the farmland that's there. So,
Any other questions for Mr. Knudsen?
Thank you.
no, thank you guys.
Good luck. Hang around after a little bit. I got a question for you. All right, all those, where are we in this? Barring any other comments, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Moving on to miscellaneous business. Adam.
All right, yeah. So this was just something the mayor and I were kind of talking about. Kind of historically, when someone wanted to do outdoor events, so like, in this scenario, it's a regular thing, so Plan Commission would definitely be involved. But when, especially now, I think it's kind of come up with all the COVID stuff, is the idea of more people doing outdoor events, but doing just like 1-up or 2-up events. Like they want to have a band outside, they want to have, for a one-time event. Historically, if it was just like a one-day event, one time, or a one-day event 2 times throughout the calendar year, at staff level, we would never take it to Plan Commission, and it would kind of just lie in the hands of the clerk's office because they are required to get an outside dance permit through them, which goes through council and finance, and as well as they're also required to possibly amend their liquor license depending on that. So it's never really been a question when those small events. Now some of these events are getting to be more repetitive, where you can maybe make the case they're part of the outside operations, which should really be a Plan Commission question. So the mayor and I were kind of talking to see if there's any kind of consensus of, is there any kind of magical number or guidance of when we talk to applicants where we say, hey, yes, we do want them to come in front of plan commission, you know, is it 3, is it 6, is it 10, is it no number? You know, do we want to just leave it in the hands of finance and council since they already have some oversight? If it's, you know, if they're still not part of their permanent operations. A scenario like Pops would always still be here because it's a permanent thing per se. So I don't know if there's any thoughts, Mayor, anything you want to add?
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, just some guidance on how much involvement do you guys want?
Well, here, I bumped into, because 2 events were canceled, so I bumped at Vintage Grounds. I just happened to drive by and they had a band outside, or like a 3-piece band outside, and we were there for 2 hours at West. It was just right outside in that parking lot area, and I would hate to have to go through all this bureaucracy during this time to make that happen. So I like your idea about allowing this outside. I think that if we have to wait, I mean, as long as it's not encumbering stuff, I don't.
And I trust staff enough to use their discretion as far as, once it does get repetitive, you can sense that.
Well, and let's be honest, you're trusting me at this point then because.
Well, that's a different story.
That's why I'm saying this. Because they're not going to do anything that, you know, doesn't have my blessing on it. So, and I'm not always going to be in this chair. So, you know, just so keep that in mind. But, you know, we're asking for guidance on that. And at what point, you know, do you want oversight or involvement in it?
I mean, you know, I think the easiest thing we've learned is I think if it's continuous, like Pops, where it's going to be kind of just an endless thing, okay, it makes sense because now they're changing their operations for, you know, for good or for a really long term. But if it's just these kind of one-up events, it's not like no one's looking at it. I mean, council and finance are looking at it, so there is some oversight. And we've learned from some past projects, they take it serious one way or the other. So
I have no problem.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with the status quo is basically what we're being asked.
I think what we'll do is just, you know, if it's not a kind of continuous thing, we'll just leave it in the hands of finance and council. And if it would be more of a continuous, endless thing, then we would send it here kind of like we have been tonight.
There's a little slippery slope.
Yeah.
There's a little slippery slope there, you know, something good happens and it then is perpetuated. I leave it in your judgment to say, oh, okay, time out. We better put some formality into it and handle it maybe in this form.
Right. And actually, that's all part of why, you know, the way Mark's thing went forward originally was, you know, we looked at his proposal and I was like, well, that should really go through planning commission. There was a timing episode of, you know, he wanted to move forward sooner than we could have gotten it here. And I saw an opportunity to allow him to go forward. We could learn some things off of those couple things. And I think I originally said, you know, you have 3 dates, pick 2 of them, you know, and try not to compete with our beer garden. So he really didn't have 2 to pick from. But anyway, you know, it's just, you learn from it. So but at what point does it come back?
But to your point though, there are so few opportunities right now to go outside and enjoy it. And I hate to say it, but August is September and on September is October. Whatever happens in school, we're onto it. Give them some license right now. Yeah. Within reason, give them some license. Right. I'd rather see that err on that side than to drag it out and say it's got to be here.
Which is my tendency is that route anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't want to be overstepping my bounds either.
No, go for it.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with status quo. I mean, if it was an event and every weekend they were putting bands in people's backyards, I think we're all gonna hear.
We hear about we all would hear about it.
And so obviously we're cognizant of this. Yep. Another reason why, you know, Mark's works so well. There's no backyards there. It's perfect location for this. Sure. So. All right, I think that's all we needed. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. We are adjourned at 7:20. Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone. See ya.